started. Welcome everyone to another session of talking about AI and consciousness. But we are going to get even more specific today with Dr. Sang-Kyun Yu. I'm sorry. Is that right? Sang-Kyun Yu? Okay. And so this is from Techno-Orientalism to Asian Futurism. His PhD was earned in English from the University of California at Riverside. He graduated with a distinguished emphasis in speculative fiction and cultures of science. Dr. Yu also holds positions as the submissions editor for Asia and its diaspora for the Journal of the Fantastic and the Arts, and is the Korean representative for the Science Fiction Research Association. He has published several articles in science fiction, film, and television, in the International Journal of Korean History and other publications, and has received several grants and awards, including the Walter James Miller Award, a Fulbright Scholarship, as well as a Humanities Center project grant on technology and the humanities, and is currently a visiting assistant professor here at USD. So please welcome Dr. Yu.
All right, I'll begin with thanking Hannah, Lindy, Susie for giving this great opportunity to share my research project here at the Humanities Center. And with the help of this grant, I could participate the conference in Florida a week ago, International Association of the Fantastic and the Arts. I could make a workshop with the field leading scholars of science fiction and cultures of science to further develop this project, and I'm waiting for a manuscript from many of them for these projects. And I'm also happy to talk more about what I learned from this workshop and from conference in our time for Q&A. So I understand this is hour-long event, right? 20 minutes presentation and 40 minutes Q&A, right? So yeah, I will talk a little bit for the first 20 minutes about where my project came from and what I'm thinking about this project, and the basic concepts that I will engage with in this project. So I made this for people who are not majoring in this field, who are not having understanding of the field of science fiction and cultures of science, so forth and so on. So for those of you who are familiar with this kind of research, this might be a little bit too easy, but for those of you who are not majoring in this field, this will be not difficult. So, all right, so let's begin. So I'll begin with the representation of different cities and areas of United States in American literature, films, and TV dramas, because that is something really interests me. So I'll begin with New York City and how it was represented especially in science fiction. So, New York City is often represented in many Hollywood films and TV dramas, mostly as a role for bridging between the audience's sense of reality and the fantastical narrative that the science fiction films and TV dramas are having. So for example, in the film Avengers, released in 2012, there is this fantastical imaginary things are going on, right? The godly extraterrestrial figure Loki, he invades the human planet, the planet Earth, in order to subjugate human race, right? And then while these fantastical imaginary things are happening, in the background, we can see this kind of familiar iconic buildings of New York City, such as Chrysler Building, Empire State Building, so forth and so on. So these kind of iconic buildings in the background in American science fiction films and dramas and also literature, but I will use mostly visual media for this talk because I think this is more familiar examples for you. But these iconic buildings provides us a sense of urgency, right? Like this danger is imminent. He's trying to destroy these buildings that we have seen for decades, for entire lives, right? And then also it provides believability of the narrative, which is fantastical, right? So we see this kind of use of this utilization of New York City and its landscape in science fiction films and dramas as a reality anchor for the audience's sense of reality. And use of this New York City, for this role is not unique only in the Avengers. Actually, we see these kind of examples over and over in World War Z, in King Kong, in The Day After Tomorrow. Whenever there is something fantastic happening, the readers probably like, this is not believable, this is science fictional. So they are using these iconic buildings and cities for enhance the feeling of reality. There is something opposite in American literature, films, and TV drama that has the opposite role from New York City, which is Chinatown. So whenever the novel brings us into the dark alleys of Chinatown, the readers immediately knows, something bad is going to happen, something strange is going to happen, right? That's the role of Chinatown in our imagination in the United States: strangeness, exoticness, foreignness. Even though Chinatown is part of the United States, right? Chinatown is part of all the major cities in the U.S. have Chinatown, right? This way of using Chinatown as a symbol of foreignness, strangeness, exoticness shows the use of the symbol of Chinatown in a Orientalist way, in a racist, stereotypical way. And this kind of stereotype was best explained by the National Book Award winning novelist Charles Yu's recent novel Interior Chinatown, which was released 3 years ago. So in this National Book Award winning novel, Charles Yu, one of his characters says, if a film needed an exotic backdrop, Chinatown could be made to represent itself or any other Chinatown in the world. Even today, it stands in for the ambiguous Asian anywhere. So with this comment, he kind of tries to highlight the way American films and visual media, especially like kung fu films, science fiction films, fantasy films, are using Chinatown as a symbol of exotic Orientalist stereotype. So I'm using this term Orientalism, and I know many faculty member or many the upper level students are familiar with this concept. But Orientalism is the concept that was, I'll make this brief for that regard. So Orientalism is a concept created by Edward Said in his very famous influential book Orientalism, and he in this book highlights in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century European intellectuals and writers and novelists, when they imagine the Asia or the East, they use it. They imagine Asia as a place of pre-modern, anachronistic, hostile, magical, irrational, feminine, so forth and so on. So in this, the painting that Edward Said used for the cover page of this book, we can see in 19th century, late 19th century French painter, portrayed whatever this Asian city is, and this is kind of, it looks like a realistic, but actually it's a mixture of different Asian cultures and religions. So in reality, this does not make sense. The background looks like different city, while this snake charming tradition is from some other city as well. So this looks real, but not. But we can see also a lot of stereotypes that this French painter imagined when he, painted this painting, right? So you can see it's exotic and very like hostile, warlike, and also Asians are imagined as like animalistic. Also the main the character is showing just the back of the profile to us, so we cannot really understand the racial gender identity of this person, which highlights the mysteriousness of the Asians in the imagination of the European intellectuals at that period. So I think this shows really well like what Orientalism means, right? It's the stereotypical understanding about Asia from European intellectuals in 18th, 17th, 19th century. So how does Orientalism is related with science fiction? So this is my main interest in my research and teaching, how the race, how the social issues, how the politics is related with the genre of science fiction. So in order to know that, I think I have to explain a little bit about the birth of science fiction. Where does it begin? What kind of desire, what kind of ideology created this new genre, right? When does it begin? So Carl Friedman, in his book Critical Theory and Science Fiction. So first of all, there are many different theories and debates, like how we can point out the very first science fiction novel. It's still debate. There's still debate and there are different opinions. But he argues that the first science fiction novel is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The reason why he argues Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the first science fiction novel is because before Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, one of the most popular literary genre in Europe was travel narrative. So you can think about like Oliver's Travels, so First and so on. The main character, usually European man, travels abroad like Africa or Asia. And in this kind of genre, Africa or Asia were often imagined and portrayed as a place for this European traveler sexual fantasy, or a place that has exploitable resources, so forth and so on. So we can see the travel narrative, the ideology and desire inside of the travel narrative is this colonial desire, right? Colonial expansion. So it's about space, not the time. So like going abroad, like more space, more expansion, more colonialism, so forth and so on. But the reason why Kurt Friedman argues that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the first science fiction novel is because in the first part of the novel, if you read it, maybe you're still familiar with this novel's narrative. It does not begin with Dr. Frankenstein, actually, the novel. And Dr. Frankenstein creates a monster. That's what we understand about the Frankenstein. But it begins with Captain Walton, the traveler, which is very typical hero in the old travel narrative genre. And Captain Walton, he's on the ship, and then he travels and he finds someone's very far, and he just brings him into the ship. And it turns out that the stranger was Dr. Frankenstein. And now Captain Walton listens his story about monsters, of course, and so on. So we have this narrator transition at the early part of the novel. And about this part, Kurt Friedman argues that Walton is an explorer in an unproblematically spatial way, a discoverer of regions that may appear new and strange to the European observer. By contrast, Dr. Frankenstein, the purpley science fiction hero, whose emergence as protagonist transforms the narrative into a predominantly science fiction one, he is concerned with pushing back the frontiers, not of space, but of time. So indeed, if you read the novel, Dr. Frankenstein has no interest in spatial travel, in colonial expansion. What he's interested in is having this future technology. He wants to revive these dead bodies and to make it alive. So he's interested in how can he bring the future technology to the present, right? So he's a temporal hero instead of like spatial hero. And Kurt Friedman argues that this Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the first science fiction novel, was born with the another literary genre, which is historical novel. So the first historical novel, Sir Walter Scott's Waverley, was published 4 years before Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So we can say these two genres were born in exactly the same period, right? And it quotes George Lukács's, Georg Lukács's The Historical Novel to argue that these two genres were produced by the same historical event. It was influenced by the same historical event, which was French Revolution. So he argues that French Revolution was the first mass experience for many European readers. So with the French Revolution, it was the first event that allowed many European readers to identify themselves not as an individual. So before French Revolution, the regulars, if you're not novel class, like whatever happens in the politics, whatever happens in the kingdom, it has nothing to do with your life, right? But with the French Revolution, the majority of the European readers, it was the first moment to feel, oh, I'm actually part of the historical movement. I'm actually part of this nation. I'm part of Europe, right? So it was the first collective experiences for them. So because of the French Revolution and its mass experiences, many of the European readers began to imagine themselves with collective past. So what was the past of the human race as a collective, and what will be the future of the human race as a collective, right? So this kind of event allowed them to enjoy and to produce one historical novel genre, like imagining collective past, and science fiction, imagining collective future. So many the initial science fiction novels, such as Jules Verne's and H.G. Wells, we can see many of these novels are heavily interested in temporal travel instead of a spatial travel. So, for example, novel like 30,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Jules Verne, it looks like it's more interested in spatial travel, going somewhere, right? However, Carl Friedman argues that this kind of travel was made possible only for the future technology. Without having this kind of future technology and the ships and boats and rides, this kind of spatial travel will not be possible. So this novel is actually interested in heavily in temporal travel, not spatial travel. And Time Machine is also, if you read it, you can see it goes way far future. Like I don't remember exactly, but 100,000 years of the future at the end of the story. But everything happens exactly in the London. So in terms of space, there is very limited movement. And the War of the Worlds, also the title has the War of the World, but every war happens just in London and nearby areas. So we can see how the interest was shifted to temporal travel, not the space travel. So we can see this transition from the old travel narratives, colonial desire, colonial ideology, into temporal travel, interest into temporal travel. However, the fact that this transition happened does not mean that the old Orientalist stereotypical stereotype went away. It still remained in a different form in all the 20th science fiction novels. So, for example, the same novel that I just mentioned, the H.G. Wells's The Time Machine. So the time traveler goes into the future, but the future, it turns out to be dystopia. The human race evolved and devolved into two different races, the dark-skinned Moloch and fair-skinned Eloi. And fair-skinned Eloi is so weak, and they are living in constant threat from this dark-skinned underground living villain, like evil, like the Moloch race. So it's definitely dystopia. But this future dystopia, the future dystopic London, when H.G. Wells imagines, it's dystopia, but it is also full of symbols of Asia or Middle East, so the East, right? So you can see here's a Sphinx, right, in the middle of London, right, in the future London. And also the H.G. Wells describe the color of the sky in this future dystopia, quote unquote Indian red. So we can see these kind of stereotypes is coming here and there. Piece and bits. Another genre that shows this early 20th century science fiction's racism, stereotype, and Orientalism against Asians is the yellow peril genre. So in early 20th century, the genre of the yellow peril was so popular in UK and also in Europe, and many readers enjoyed it. And the most famous writer of this genre, yellow peril, is Sax Rohmer and his Dr. Fu Manchu series in early 20th century. And in this novel, there are many sequels and sequels. And Dr. Fu Manchu is usually a Chinese scientist villain who tries to use this pseudo-science, pseudo-magic from Asia in order to, overthrow Europe, right? So here are some quotes you can see, this kind of Orientalist stereotype in all the science fiction. They are Chinese, most mysterious, most cunning. Her beauty was magnificently evil, witch eyes, ancient wisdom. So this is the old Orientalism what Edward Said emphasized, like Asia as a pre-modern, magical, cunning, evil-like, pre-modern, anachronistic, so forth and so on. So this is early 20th century science fiction and its traditional Orientalism. The way Western science fiction understood and represents Asia had a radical change in 1980 with the birth of new genre of science fiction, which is cyberpunk. And the reason why in this period, the way Western novelists and intellectuals understood Asia was changed is because in that period, Japan is in its economical power and technological power surpassed United States in the first time in the history, right? So when Edward Said, thought about this traditional Orientalism, the Europe, like France, Germany, UK, the power of these European nations were way stronger, way richer, way technologically developed than Asian countries. So they had this binary, right? Europe as a mathematic, science, technology, Asia, magic, irrational, feminine, so forth and so on. But this binary did not work, began not to work anymore in the 1980s. So in 1980s, Japanese company Mitsubishi purchased Rockefeller Center, the symbol of New York's economy, and also Sony purchased Columbia Pictures, another symbol of Hollywood industry. In this period, Japanese electronic gadgets, Japanese cars, Japanese the science and technology was way more developed than the United States, and that created a sense of like threat for many American readers and citizens, which is very similar to, we can imagine their sense of threat if we compare to what we are feeling about like, oh, like the China-US trade war is threatening, so forth and so on, right? So something like that, yeah. And this is just a little side talk, but the same amount of land in order to purchase in Tokyo, it was 100 times more expensive than the same amount of land in Manhattan at the period. So we can understand how the bubble was crazy. Eventually it fell, the bubble was popped up, but that was how the Japan was really, really threatening in this period. So this kind of sense of threat from Japanese economy and science was best represented in the genre of cyberpunk. And here we have these two, the founding novels of cyberpunk genre, William Gibson's Neuromancer, Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. In this cyberpunk genre, Asia was portrayed and understood as not as pre-modern and ancient magical anymore, but as futuristic, technologically developed, as postmodern, machine-like, robotic, so forth and so on. So here we can see some quotes from Neuromancer. In this world is a virtual reality where cyberpunk is about virtual reality, right? So the sky above the port was the color of television. The sky has the color of television, right? So we can see this is virtual reality, not the real world. But in this virtual world, the black clinics of Chiba is a Japanese city, the real city, or the cutting edge. So we can see Japan is understand a cutting edge technology. However, the dreams came on in the Japanese nightlife, livelier voodoo. So still kind of stereotypical kind of, oh, this is like dark magical kind of technology, something dangerous, right? And also China is mentioned, something dark was forming at the core of the Chinese program. So here in this way of understanding Asia, so the writer acknowledged Asia has a better technology, better science. However, there is something sinister, something still dark, something we have to be careful. And the Matrix is actually a good example of showing this kind of new type of Orientalism. So Matrix is actually influenced so much from this kind of cyberpunk predecessors, Snow Crash or the Gibson's Neuromancer. Here in Matrix, we can see once Neo, the Keanu Reeves, Neo entered into the virtual space, the landscape suddenly changes into this pseudo-Asian locale, right? Everything was like the United States or whatever, underground, there was nothing Asian. But when he entered into the virtual space, suddenly it changes into Asia. So, and like, as an Asian, I cannot identify which country this is. Like, this looks like China, Vietnam, Korea, maybe Japan. So it's like, like very ambiguous, right? And no one can understand, like there is this kind of exotic Chinese characters in the background. And what he's doing is it looks like a Hong Kong Kung Fu or martial art, karate or Taekwondo, like, so, it's a kind of mix of everything. It's not specific, right? And so in this film, Asia exists only in the virtual space, only in virtual reality, while everything Western exists in reality. So we can see this kind of cyberpunk. So about this kind of new trend, new portrayal, new kind of Orientalism, the writers David Molly and Kevin Lobbins in their book Spaces of Identity, they named it as Techno-Orientalism in order to distinguish it from Edward Said's traditional Orientalism. So we can see these two types of Orientalism in the history of American science fiction. Traditional Orientalism, Asia was understood as backward, anti-progressive, and primitive, while Techno-Orientalism, Asia was understood as a futuristic, robotic, postmodern, consumeristic. So it looks like an opposite, however, in a way that both Orientalisms understood Asia as anachronistic. It does not share the same time with the Western counterpart, right? Both Orientalism understood Asian people as not as the same human, right? They are imaginary, they are fantastic, exotic, foreign, right? So in that sense, even though they are temporally opposite, but in that sense, it's the same idea. And once you know and understand this concept, techno-orientalism, you can see same examples over and over and over and over. Asia is robot, right? Robocop or Terminator, or in Matrix, in Ex Machina, or Cloud Atlas, so forth and so on. Asian cities as a this postmodern, robotic, machine-like, so forth and so on. So we see all these stereotypes and Orientalism about Asia in American popular culture, visual media, science fiction novels, so forth and so on. However, things are changing, right? We are not living in the past. We are living in post-Crazy Rich Asians era, right? So the first all Asian cast film in Hollywood history was Joy Luck Club, based on the same title novel written by Amy Tan in 1990s. And then it took 25 years to see the second all Asian cast film in Hollywood, which was Crazy Rich Asians. And the success of Crazy Rich Asians allowed a series of Asian themed films in Hollywood, like Farewell, Minari, and Turning Red in Disney, so forth and so on. And finally, this year was really highlighted with Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? Getting Oscars and everything. So we are seeing, and a lot of these kind of Asian themed films are getting popular, especially Everything Everywhere All at Once. And this is not, something very new for people who are studying literature, because in literature there were many Asian American writers. And what interests me is, as we saw from Everything Everywhere All at Once, it was the first Asian themed film that won so many Oscars, but it is also a genre of science fiction, right? So, so I think a lot of Asian American writers and Asian writers are trying to use this kind of speculative mode, or the genre tropes of science fiction, in order to challenge the ideas of this kind of Orientalism and racism and stereotypes. So, for example, Russo Jackie's novel A Tale for the Time Being, it also won many awards, and it was already like 15, 20, 12 years ago, right? From the Everything Everywhere All at Once. In this novel, the writer intentionally challenges and bans our conception of time and space. So we see the Orientalism, the time is the key, right? So Asia was always understood as either past or the future. But in this novel, the time and space is dwarfed and banned and challenged. So there is a Ruth who's living in Canada and now who's living in Japan in the past. But now she put her diary in a Hello Kitty bento box, and tsunami happened, and this bento box goes ashore and goes to the Pacific. And then finally, Ruth, while she's jogging, she found this bento box at a beach, and she reads it, and there this kind of trans-Pacific, which connects to different places and spaces and connected to different time, is begin to happen, right? So with this, a lot of Asian American writers are trying to ban our notion of space and time, and she also connects Buddhism and quantum physics in this novel as well. And a lot of, as I said, Asian American novels and Asian novels are trying to deal with this kind of speculative mode, try to engage with time and space. And the reason why they are so interested in this kind of science fiction mode, speculative mode, maybe we can get some hints from Saidiya Herman's article, Venus in 2X. In this article, Saidiya Herman argues that this concept, critical fabulation. And she argues critical fabulation is the combining of historical and archival research with critical theory and fiction narrative to fill in the blanks left in the historical record. So here she argues that for the racial minority, a lot of history of racial minority was not properly recorded in the archive. So if you think about like African-American slaves or Asian American coolie laborers, so forth and so on, their histories were not recorded in archive. So she argues that these Asian American or African American writers uses their ability of imagining, fabulation, speculation, in order to fill the gap of the history, the lost history. And I think critical fabulation is not useful only for the past, but also to imagine different future. So in Hollywood, in our typical science fiction blockbuster, it's usually white American male, able-bodied, heterosexual man as a representative of the human race going to the space to save the human planet, right? The planet Earth. So in this imagination of the future, there is no room for racial minority or LGBTQ people, so forth and so on. However, recently, in order to challenge this kind of the futurism, this as of the white supremacy as a default, a lot of writers and scholars in the science fiction studies field are creating these different ways of imagining future, such as Afrofuturism, Latino futurism, or farm worker futurism. So these alternative futurisms, we can see African American woman can be also an astronaut in the HBO drama Software Country. Korean American girl can be the last survivor of the human race in Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer, or Chinese scientists can also save the planet Earth in Chinese science fiction film Wandering Earth. So this is what I think, what I wanted to conceptualize with the term Asian futurism. So even though Asians are existing in the future, they exist in the future either in a techno-orientalist way or Asian futuristic way. It's a two totally different thing, I think. So that's the broadly the gist of what I try to make in this research project, which I titled From Techno-Orientalism to Asian Futurism. Thank you.